Mishnah in Sotah. And the Mishnah had a list of challenges that the generation before Mashiach arrived in are going to face. And most of these challenges were, I guess you could say, society related. First of all, they were geographically located in the land of Israel, but then it moved very quickly into a breakdown of society, of norms, of the family unit, of children against parents, teachers, leaders, and it carried on and it got worse and worse until it said the enemies of people would be the members of their own household. Then there was a very cryptic statement that we did not define, but we are going to today. And the statement of the Mishnah, a very famous statement, is the generation before Mashiach comes is the face of a dog. The face of the generation has the face of a dog. Now, on the surface, that seems like an insult. People who live before Mashiach comes are going to be like dogs. However, there's obviously something much deeper that's being told to us over here. Let's have a look at a few interpretations, and a couple of these are written in your books on page 151, so do review that, but let's do them outside and let's think about this. What is the Hebrew word for a dog? Kelev. Kelev. What does the word Kelev actually mean?
A man's love or something.
Kelev is kol lev, man's best friend. Man's best friend, a heart, yeah. Heart always represents the emotional connection. So already you're like, well, maybe things are what we think they are when you call someone a Kelev. Maybe, yes. Maybe, no. Rashi answers and says, actually, it is a bad thing. What do dogs do? Whatever they want. Where do they do it? Wherever they want. So Rashi says this is actually a sign that people are going to look like their dogs. It doesn't mean literally look like their dogs, although we'll see some do say that. But it means that people are going to act like their dogs, doing whatever they want, wherever they want, with no shame and no busha. It's going to be a generation where people are going to do whatever they want in public, in full spectacle of everyone else. That is the pre-Messianic era. That's Rashi, yeah. People are going to look like their dogs. They're going to act like their dogs, bli busha, with no shame. With no shame. Just like dogs will take care of all their business outside in public so that everyone sees and not really care, so too we're going to see people acting in that brazen and shameless way. That's Rashi's interpretation. His first interpretation is people will actually start to look like their dogs. And some people say, yeah, people will start to relate to their dogs like they don't relate to humans. People actually start preferring, I know it sounds crazy, people start preferring their dogs to their own families.
I've met people like that.
So have I. People start to build a connection to their klavim, to their dogs, that they don't seem to have with their own families. Why is that? Well, there's also going to be a lack of authenticity before Mashiach arrives. And people will not be able to trust their own relationships with other people. Instead, they're going to go to the Kelev, Kol Lev, all heart, and find their relationship with their own dogs, their own canines, before they do with other people. This is not a good thing. It's actually really, really sad that people are going to have to find their authentic relationships with dogs instead of with humans. This shows the decline of human nature. And that's how it actually fits more into the Mishnah. Because the Mishnah was talking about the breakdown of the family unit. And this part of the Mishnah kind of goes with the flow that, yeah, it's going to be so bad between families and relationships with each other and husband and wife and parents that people will instead be like, you know what, at least I could trust my dog. Having said that, some people say it's not a good thing as well, because when it comes to your relationship with your dog, dogs seem very happy when they see you, don't they? Cats, who knows what's going on inside? But a dog, when it sees you, he jumps and he barks and he's happy and wags his tail. On the inside, though, the dog may hate you. It's all exterior. We don't know We don't know what's going on inside the dog's brain. So he says the same thing when it comes to people. It's a mashal, it's a metaphor. It's not literal. It's a metaphor because people are going to be so unauthentic. On the outside, they're going to be like your friends, just like that dog wagging its tail when he sees you. But on the inside, they could hate you and actually be working towards your downfall. So we're living in a very exterior, facade-like society, and relationships will be extremely non-trusting before Mashiach comes. That all goes back to the original idea of who can we trust? Ella Avinu b'Shamayim. You can only put your faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So those are a few answers to this cryptic statement by the rabbis in the Mishnah. Yeah. Page 71. Yeah. In the book it's page 151.
Why will people look like they're not?
Doesn't mean literally, although, let's be honest, you walk down the street sometimes and someone's walking their dog, you look at the dog, you look at the person, look at the, you're like, it's uncanny. It means their behavior. That's probably what it means. That's what Rashi means. They're going to act like their dogs, right? In other words, you look like someone. It doesn't mean you literally look like them. It just means you act like them. Yeah? Make sense? Good. The last answer, and probably the most famous answer, I found a number of years ago. Actually, when I was a yeshiva bach, I was a single guy in Israel, and I bought a little thin book called Ik V'Sei de Mashiach. And in this book, it gives another answer to this cryptic piece of Mishnah that people, before Mashiach comes, the face of the generation are going to have the face of a dog. Who are the face of the generation? Who is that referring to? So according to him, it actually refers to the leaders of the generation, the politicians, but I would say in our generation, the people who are famous, right? What we call the influencers, although we probably don't want to be influenced by them, but the people whose face we see all the time in the media, in life, online, wherever it is. Those people will have the face of a dog. But let's have a look at the leaders of society, people who run the government, people who run societies and corporations, whoever it is. This, says Rav Salanta, is who the Mishnah is talking about. The leaders are the face of the generation, and they will have the face of a dog. Well, what does that mean? Are we insulting them? And he says no. It's a description of society before Mashiach comes. Have you ever seen, he says, a person walk their dog? Who usually walks in front? The dog, right? The dog leads. And if you were to see that image of a person walking with their dog, whether on a leash or not, in front of them, you would think, incorrectly but understandably, that the dog is leading the human. When do you know that the human is really in charge? Because the human is going to make a left or right turn. What does a dog do? It turns its face, doubles back to follow its master. This is the generation where leaders are like the dogs. They're not really leading. They're walking in front, but that's not true leadership. They are basically acting on the desires and the whims of society. Real leadership in society, says Rav Salanta, will not exist. There won't be true leadership. People who seem to be leading will just be following the masses, and whatever they want, they will give them. This is not a good thing, because true leadership means that someone is making an absolute definitive decision and holding by it based on true Torah principles. That is going to be voided right before Mashiach comes. People will not act out of conviction or principles. They'll just act because that's what the people want. People say this is okay now, then it becomes okay. If people say, masses of people say, we want to accept this as the reality, the leaders will be like, yep, we're with you. What do they really believe? Who knows? They've got the face of a dog. Who knows what's going on inside? It's pure conjecture. They just kind of like go with society. And if that's what everyone wants, that's what they get. That is his understanding of this Mishnah. A dire breakdown of society, of principles, of convictions. When Mashiach comes, we're going to see true leadership. Someone not acting out of the desires of the people they are leading, which is not true leadership, but actually based upon true convictions and true principles. That is real leadership. And as a king, Mashiach is going to have to do that.
I feel like see this with like rabbis in some communities also, because a lot of times what happens is that like the community wants things to be a certain way, and then rabbis are like, okay, well everyone's doing this, so let's like impose this leniency.
Yeah.
So like how do we?
It's what we call a slippery slope. It's not easy to have conviction and to hold by your true beliefs and say it out loud before being considered a number of things and cancelled in our society. It's a big problem. It's a very, very scary time. People just don't have that. This is really what the Mishnah is saying, according to Rav Salanter's interpretation of it. Yeah. Ricky?
But can you say that, like, society is just the leadership right now? Not that the leaders are being led by society, but that the leadership itself is society.
No, that's not the way it is. Leadership comes from people, individuals, governments who we look up to. What is the idea of a king anyway? We discussed at the beginning. What is the idea of a king?
Yeah, but, like,
Why do you even need a king? Why do you need a leading individual? Why do you need a president of a university? Why can't we just have all the school and all the students decide how things work in a university? Now you could listen to their opinion, right? And be very good, because eventually there'll be complete and utter chaos. Because you have 1,000 people, or in this university, 2,000 people coming up saying, I want it this way, I want it that way. No decisions get made. It's all done. It's problematic. It sounds nice that everyone's going to be listened to, and everyone's going to be accommodated, everyone's going to be respected, everyone's going to have, and you're right, in theory it sounds wonderful, but that's not leadership. Leadership means I hear, I respect, but a decision needs to be made. As we say in England, you don't say in America, the Prime Minister is called first among equals. I happen to like that expression, not just because I'm English. First among equals. We're equal, but I'm first. I have to make the final decision. Eventually, someone has to make a final decision. You can't just have small little, which we're seeing in our generation, small little cult groups making decisions, dissuading or persuading leadership, saying this is the way it's got to be.
But isn't that leadership the one making the final decision?
Yeah, that is
So,
because we don't, very, very good, because we don't ascribe to just a few people running everything from low down without having at least made themselves somehow in charge. In other words, do we choose leaders? In some cases we do, in some cases we don't. You know? Look, in Jewish leadership, which is actually a new book I'm working on, there are checks and balances. Just like you have an America society, government, you have checks and balances. We have checks and balances too, yeah?
no.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. We have kings, but the kings had to deal with the prophets, and the prophets had to deal with the Kohanim.
Yeah, but that was
So, and there were tribal leaders. There's always checks, and no one has. You never want too much power in one place. You want to check and balance the power structure that's in every place.
But today we don't have checks and balances.
Well, you're right. We don't have official checks and balances, but Jewish society, Jewish people end up having kind of like leaders who end up rising to the top who will check and balance each other. Unlike other religion societies where one measure, and that's the end of it. That's just the way it is. Although now we're seeing in those other religions too, right? People having convictions for their own theological beliefs and just going with the whims of individuals. Look, whether you like it or not, Judaism is a theocracy. We go by God's word, right? It's not what we think, it's what Hashem thinks. And that becomes the realm of society and for all decisions made, right? Okay, so that's the breakdown. There's a lot more to say on this, but let's just move forward. The next Gemara is going to talk about how scholarship, and this is across the board, is going to decline. Now, this scholarship may not be the widespread knowledge that's in the world, but scholarship within scholars is going to be much less than it was before. And that's the Gemara, and Rav Yochanan talks about it. And this is the Gemara in Sanhedrin. Rav Yochanan, Dorish ben David, the generation when the son of King David comes, i.e. Mashiach, Talmid Chachamim mitma'atim. We're going to see much fewer true Torah scholars. Much fewer Torah scholars. V'hashar, and the remainder, we're not sure what the remainder is. Eineim kalot biyagon v'anacha. We're going to see their eyes are going to fail with sorrow and tsarat rabat, and much difficulties and grief and challenges. Ugizerot kashot. There are going to be many decrees. They're going to come against the Jewish people. Ad shirishona pekuda shniya memer levo. Until each new decree is going to come, and it's going to another one and another one. We're going to see a lot of decrees. They're going to be held against the Jewish people. What is this Gemara talking about? It's a little cryptic, and there's various ways to understand it. Let's have a look at a couple of the ways to understand it. First of all, people, well, we know this concept before. There's something called Yuridot Hadorot, a decline of the generations. This we know. Still, we said Mashiach can come in later generations because there's a cumulative effect that goes with the generations. But there is a decline in the generations themselves. Over here, the decline is going to be the scholarly understanding of scholars. It's going to go down. People are not going to be as great in Torah scholarship as they were in previous generations. Yeah.
I feel like Evan talks about how, like, we know Mashiach's coming because everyone's doing so much more, blah, blah, blah. But in this instant, how is someone supposed to know if Mashiach's coming if it could have just been like, oh, at one point we were very scholarly and then our scholarship declined, we don't discern.
This is not necessarily a predictive statement. They're not saying, you know Mashiach's coming when this happens. It's like, look out for Mashiach. This is one way to figure it out. I don't think it's saying that. It's saying that one of the things that's going to prepare us for Mashiach is this unfortunate. It may be one of the results of society before Mashiach comes, but the idea is that Mashiach is going to fix that. Or is going to lead us desiring Mashiach more, which will make us pray more for Mashiach's arrival. So it doesn't mean like, oh, when you see it, that means Mashiach is coming. It's telling us that this is one of the things that Mashiach is going to cure, and he's going to help fix. Or it's going to lead us to be like, wow, and we always hear this, right? Everyone says, oh, this rabbi not as great as my rabbi when I was growing up, right? You always hear this. Everyone's always like criticizing the present day leadership compared to how they were before. And believe me, the years before, they're complaining about it for the years before then as well. No one's ever perfect, you know? So it's less of a predictive statement as this is what we're going to be dealing with. So when it happens, you should know that don't panic too much because Mashiach is near, or panic because it may get worse. I don't know. Yeah, I'm saying it doesn't have to just be these decrees, we're not sure where they're coming from or who's giving them to us. It may be a general statement of anti-Semitism. It could be that hatred of the Jewish people from governments and decrees against Torah are increasing in the land of Israel. That could be the interpretation of the Gemara as well. Rav Dessler, however, gives a different interpretation. So turn over the page, and he gives a very novel. Now remember, Rav Dessler lived before the Second World War and after, and he lived in England and then Eretz Yisrael. And he spoke a lot about the transition from Olam Hazeh to Olam Haba. That's a lot of his writings that I saw talk about this. He definitely felt as though Olam Haba was a discussion, which remember Mashiach is the beginning of Olam Haba, that needs to be had. So he talks about like this. He says, maybe all this bad stuff that's happening, he gives two interpretations. Maybe all the bad stuff that's happening is actually there to help us in the arrival of Mashiach. Well, how could that be? How can the breakdown of society and all this terrible stuff that we're seeing in the world today, all this no shame and inauthenticity, all this stuff, how can that be good? And he says, well, let's have a look at another area of understanding, and that is medicine. What do they do? It's actually maybe more prescient than we realize. What do people do when they want to protect a person against a disease? They give them a vaccine, right? Or an inoculation. What is usually inside the actual disease? They take a very minuscule amount of the disease, they put it into the body builds up resistance against it. Yeah, that's the way it works. Any biology majors over here? Okay. Right? Then they build a resistance against it. So when the actual disease comes, already your cells, right, and all your body has built up an immunity, thank you, against that thing itself. He says it's the same in spiritual matters as well. Many times God will give us a bad thing, a disease, which is unpleasant. However, what that's actually going to do is inoculate us against the real big disease that's prevalent and going to come our way. According to this, all the challenging things we see in society that whether we like it or not we're affected by, even in a small way, maybe not directly, is unpleasant, but is actually protecting us against, whether we realize it or not, because you don't know to what degree the inoculation is working against a disease because you don't get it. But actually you're fortifying yourself against the bigger societal challenges that are coming your way because you've actually built up resistance in a much smaller way. And therefore, when challenges come to us as individuals and we feel those challenges, really, whether we like it or not, we're being inoculated against a much bigger challenge and problem that's on its way. So maybe the Mishnah telling us that the breakdown of the family unit and all the challenges we're seeing, whether in our own families or our friends' families or society in general, is actually protecting us against a much bigger challenge that is on its way. And that, he says, is the way to look at it. That's a more positive spin that Hashem is actually allowing bad things to happen to help us push back against even bigger challenges that are going to be happening. Yeah, Amalia?
It's not a really good argument against trapping yourself permanently inside the Jewish bubble, but assimilating yourself into Western culture a little bit, so when an actual major problem does come, you're not faced with this major contradiction to everything, you know?
I don't think he's telling us, actually I know for sure, he wasn't saying that we have to just jump out in society and get involved in a lot of bad stuff.
I'm saying to not trap yourself in the bubbles, that when something, you don't force yourself to go from 0 to 100 when something awful goes on.
I hear. Having said that, funny, people describe the bubble like a bad thing. Maybe a bubble's a good thing.
I love that. There's nothing
It's
wrong
in
with
negativities, obviously, but I'm saying it potentially is an argument against trapping yourself. So when something does come, because whether we like it or not, something always comes. You're not forced to go from 0 to 100. You're used to
Look,
being able to fight.
I hear you. Everyone puts a line in the sand. Everyone will protect and allow certain things into their societies, into their homes, right? There's no doubt about it. In the end, and we know this from many stories of the Torah, no matter how righteous a great person is, they're still, and no matter how much they close themselves off, right, without buying a cabin off the grid, right, somewhere in, I don't know, Alabama or Minnesota, in the end, we're all affected by society around us. Everyone is. It just seeps through to even the greatest people, right? The greatest test case is Noah. Noah was a great tzaddik, but he was still affected by his generation. He's like the test case for this idea, although there are others as well. I mean, Avram was also affected by his generation, there's no doubt about it. Even no matter how much you try to hold out the negative influences, we're all products of our generation. We're all feeling it, it seeps in. He's turning on his head like, well, that's bad, but at least why is God allowing that to happen? Specifically right before Mashiach comes, is a form of inoculation to help us fight it off. That's what he's saying. Look, I'll show you inside. Let's see it inside and let's see how he says it. He says, Yadu refuat. We know in the world of medicine, healthy people are given inoculations by injecting a weakened form of the illness in order to arouse antibodies to fight off that disease. So too in spiritual matters. It is sometimes necessary to inject ourselves with a state of extreme materialism, even at a time when the good inclination is not under attack. As when things are not so bad, what's going to happen is by doing this, by God allowing this to happen, and these ideas seep through, we're able to at least build some kind of resistance, and we're not, like you hear about these small little societies in Brazil or Africa somewhere where they don't come into contact, and suddenly even a small little disease can wipe them out, right? Happened here in America as well, right? To the Native Americans. That little disease, that's not a good thing. You need to have some inoculation. It's a very nuanced point. Let's just finish off and come to you, Ricky. This is the reason that Adam was sent into the world of physicality, and it's also the reason by the test of the pre-Messianic era, the arousal to fight physicality will itself be a spiritual catalyst to bring Mashiach. So he's going even further. He's like, yeah, we're going to see that people are going to really succumb to physical matters before Mashiach comes, and we're all going to be, I don't know, negatively influenced. He's like, maybe there's a positive spin on this, that it's going to help protect us against a much bigger problem that society is trying to bring us down. And we're going to build resistance against it. That's his first answer.
So all these things that are going to happen, like Chavlei Mashiach or whatever, it's going to be like for everyone, right? It's not going to be like one individual.
Everyone's going to be affected by Chavlei Mashiach.
So what,
Even the tzaddikim get affected by Chavlei
right,
Mashiach.
but what he's saying now, like we have little challenges in the physical world, whatever. Is that individual challenges or is that
Individual society, and the individuals are just products of the society. We're all influenced by the mores and customs of people out there. We're all being influenced. We're all constantly stuff we see and.
A dumb example is like, let's say like I break my finger and like that's a challenge or whatever. Is that like a challenge? Is that like innocuous?
That's not what he's talking about
Or is it
now.
like something
Well, actually, it's interesting.
like an influence?
Someone pointed out. Funny you give that example because Rav. Who's Rav KJ? Rav Schwab. He actually says when you break something, you'll notice that the bone fixes itself and creates a harder barrier, right? So it's harder to break that point again because the bone knots itself, right, and makes it hard, Rav Schwab says, for that piece to be broken again. So as an individual, it may have that effect. But he's talking here about societal influences. Let's look at a second answer.
So it's societal challenge.
Yeah, but we have to. But we're affected by society. Another reason Vachevlei HaMashiach, says Rav Tesla, is because it's impossible to appreciate the good unless you suffer through the darkness and challenges. So we said one of the expressions used for Mashiach's arrival is boker, and the expression for galut, deep galut, is laila, nighttime. So he says, well, therefore, before Mashiach comes, which is galut, and that's why the darkest time of the night is right before the sun comes up. It's very, very dark. It's the deepest, darkest time of the night. That's done for a reason. So when the light comes, you are able to prepare and adjust yourself and your sight for the new light. That's why light always comes gradually. There's dusk and there's early morning, right? And there's Amud HaShachar, all these different phases that come before the sun finds itself in the middle of the sky. So he says it's the same thing over here as well. What's going to happen is we're going to appreciate Boker when we've gone through darkness. Everything was great, and then Mashiach came. Just like Chavlei Mashiach birth pangs, the birth is more appreciated when the challenge comes with it, right? God could have arranged things that, where do you get kids from? Go to the supermarket, buy your groceries, and there's a baby on the shelf. You just pick it off and put it inside your... But you don't appreciate the child, right? Unless there's been challenges that have come with it. He's like saying it's the same thing. We're going to appreciate the arrival of Mashiach. The light will be appreciated when we first experience the darkness. So it's all about the appreciation. Just like a story or a novel or a movie, things get worse and worse and worse until the final scene comes and flips it around. So too Mashiach, the same thing, which is why Purim's story is one of the metaphors for Mashiach's arrival. Things get worse and worse, and the decrees of Haman and Achashverosh get worse and worse until Esther in one moment reveals herself, and Yeshuat Hashem, Keref Ayin. God's salvation comes in the blink of an eye. It all turns around, as the Megillah says, V'nahafachu. It all turns around. And that's what makes a great book or a great story. Everything flips in one moment, and suddenly it's all good. But you only appreciated the punchline of the joke, or the last page of the story, or the last scene in the movie, if you went through all the challenges and the emotions that came with the build-up up to that point.
If that was the case, then why was it only degree that childbirth would be so painful after Chava sinned?
Oh, very, very good. Because had Chava, the Mashiach would have come straight away. Adam and Rishon would have been Mashiach. It all would have been perfect. That's exactly it. Thank you. Right. That all kicked in because of that. It all kicked in because of the sin of Adam and Chava. Had Adam and Chava not sinned, everything would have been great. Yeah.
I was gonna say, could you also not argue that it's not just about like appreciating, but also getting you yourself ready for? As in, if we could just go to the shop and pick a baby off the shelf, like we need those 9 months to prepare, like emotionally, physically. Like,
Very good.
there's certain things that need to be done, and therefore, like, we appreciate it more because of those 9 months, but it's also like a chance for us to like prepare ourselves for this huge moment.
Hachana, a hechsher prepares us. Yeah, right. Imagine if a kid just turned up as a teenager. Wow. Can't think of anything worse. Imagine that. Imagine one gives birth and out comes like a 15-year-old boy. Mom, Dad, I'm bored. I'll do something. It's not fair. You always give more to my brother and sister. It's not fair. David always gets more than me. It's not fair. Oh my God. Victor Miller actually says that's why Hashem makes babies so cute. Because if they weren't cute, you'd kill them. Right? You wouldn't have patience to cry. And what does a baby do? Baby can't rationalize. They just cry. How do you answer a cry? It's not just say. Right? If a baby turns up like, I'm hungry, like, wait 5 minutes. You can rationalize. So Hashem actually created babies without the sense, and they're just like, what are we going to say? Wah, back? That's just the way it is. It's very clever. Kadosh Baruch Hu created every creature in this world with exactly the right midot that are needed. Okay, fine. Another reason, so let's have this piece inside. Another reason for the trails of pre-Messianic era, the Chevlei Mashiach. But if you're asking your final what Chevlei Mashiach means, you're not going to know the answer to that, right? That expression, yeah, we got that? And there's always people who don't. Because it's impossible to preach the positive without seeing the opposite. Even about the future that's written. This is Malachi. He's quoting the final prophecy of the final prophet Malachi. After Malachi, the spiritual world broke down. No more nevuah. So whatever Malachi's got to say is the last prophet must have a lot to do with the arrival of Mashiach, yeah? And he says in chapter 3:18, that's actually the final chapter of Malachi, you shall return and you shall see the difference between the righteous and the wicked. It's going to be very clear. Very, very clear towards the end of days. Absolute righteousness and absolute wickedness. It's going to be very, very clear. A person will never learn how spiritual he is until he understands how physical he can be. So we're living in a generation where people are getting up to some pretty crazy stuff. And the challenges we have spiritually in our generation, our grandparents couldn't have fathomed. We see more crazy stuff in one day. Actually, I'm going to change that. I used to say that 5 years ago. In 1 hour than our ancestors saw in their entire lifetimes. It's just unbelievable. We're being downloaded into our brains is so much of everything, a lot of it bad, some of it good, but there's a lot there. For us to be able to decipher good and bad is very, very difficult. One of Mashiach's jobs is going to help us do that. For this reason, we need the pre-Messianic era and all its darkness. Right? So we'll be able to really see, now that was bad. Now I know good. That was dark. Now I see light. That's what he's saying. And things are going to be so challenging. Things are going to be so challenging before Mashiach comes that the Gemara actually lists individuals who said they don't want to be alive before Mashiach comes. The spiritual challenges that are going to occur are going to be so bad that even the great sages of the Jewish people said, I don't want to do it. Amar Ula. Ula said, Yetev lachimine. Let Mashiach come, but I don't want to see him. Imagine that. Imagine Ula saying, he said, I want Mashiach to come because I want society to be better and I want the redemption and the knowledge of God to be widespread, just like the oceans cover the earth's surface, but I don't want to be there when it happens. And Rabbah said, also, let him come, but I don't want to see him. So then I have Ula and Rabbah both saying, let Mashiach come, but I don't want to be there when he happens. They didn't mean they didn't want to be here when he actually arrives, but they don't want to be here for the build-up to that point. Rav Yosef, however, gave a contradictory opinion, which is difficult to understand in of itself, because that's a pretty extreme thing. But he says, you know what, let Mashiach come, and I so want to be there when he arrives. I so want to be there that I'm even willing to sit in the shadow of his donkey saddle. Let me just catch a glimpse. Let me just just experience that exquisite moment of redemption, let me be there. Let me be there. Abaye asked Rabbah, what is the reason for you not wanting to see him? So Rabbah said, and he said, is it because of all the challenges that are going to happen before he comes? And he said, yeah, because of all the pre-Messianic challenges that are going to affect the world before Mashiach comes, which I'll be affected by. He knew himself that I'll be affected by them. And I don't want to be tested like that. So Rabbi Elazar said, well, wait a minute. We know that there's something we can do to protect ourselves from the Chevlei HaMashiach, from the birth pains of Mashiach. What can we do to protect ourselves from the societal challenges, from the inauthentic generation before Mashiach comes, from all the negative influences that are going to be thrust upon us before Mashiach comes, from all the darkness that exists in the world? How are we going to be able to protect ourselves? According to the Gemara, Ulla and Rabbah did not feel confident in their own spiritual greatnesses to protect themselves from the spiritual challenges that would prevail before Mashiach comes. Rav Elazar in our Gemara turns around to Rabbah and says, but wait a minute, don't we know that you can be spared from Chevlei HaMashiach, from the challenges that will come before Mashiach by engaging in Torah and doing Gemilot Chasadim, being good to each other. Isn't that enough to protect a person? We know that, he says. According to Rav Elazar, that's a given. Rabbah said, that's true, and I do have a lot of Torah, and I am very good at mitzvah bein adam lachavero. However, I'm nervous that the sins I do, the averot I do, are going to work against me and remove some of that protection. So that was Rabbah's reasoning why he did not want to be alive right before Mashiach comes. Rav Yosef, however,
Wait, what was Rabbah's name?
Rabbah was saying that I know that learning Torah and doing Gemilut Chasadim, how he knew what we're going to see. But Rabbah understood that before Mashiach comes, Torah and Ma'asim Tovim bein Adam Lachavero would protect a person against Chevlei HaMashiach, all the challenges before Mashiach comes. He knew that. So Rabbi Elazar said, then why do you not want to be alive and see the arrival of Mashiach? So he says, although that's true, I'm scared that the Averot I do will counteract and work against all that good. That was Rabbah's concern, and that's why he held by the opinion that he did not want to be alive when Mashiach comes. Yeah.
Do you want to be?
I don't know if this is like,
We have no choice.
like these people are leaders, right? Is it good leadership to say that like something that your people will inevitably have to go through, that you as a leader don't want to go through it? I just feel like
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I can hear it. First, he's very honest. He's being very honest. He's like, let Mashiach comes, because I'm not strong enough to withstand the challenges that come with it. It's like when we look back at the Holocaust, right? Lahavdil. We look back at the Holocaust, they're like, you know what? We hear stories of people who went through things like, I couldn't have done that. There's leaders today who be like, I couldn't have got through that.
That's something that happened already, so we know the Holocaust.
Well, this is also Nevuah. We have prophecies of what's going to happen as well.
Mashiach isn't here yet, so we don't know exactly what is Chavlei Mashiach or what isn't.
Well, we're told what we saw in Mishnah that detailed in a lot of detail what's going to be like.
So, okay, so like you have the Holocaust, but you also have the Spanish Inquisition, you also have the Crusades. Like, we can all say that we wouldn't have wanted to live through that, but
Yeah.
that happened already.
Okay, and he's saying we know what's going to happen. He's saying we know what's going to happen, and I don't want to be there when that happens because I'm going to succumb.
Isn't that like bad leadership to say like, imagine if like Moshe Rabbeinu would like go up and say like, oh yeah, like let's have Yetzias Mitzrayim, but I don't want to be a slave. This sucks. Like that's.
Well, he
not-
wasn't.
Okay, but let's say he was. Like that's not good leadership. That's not like you have to sympathize with the people. Like that's not making anyone.
You have to.
motivated to,
Okay,
like,
we're saying.
wanna
Okay,
be-
very good. Let me answer like this. Like we were saying, I would say like this. I would say I hear, but everyone has to know that they are leadership of their own generation. Not expect to be a leader of a
If you're
previous
writing
or
in
a...
the Talmud that people are going to be learning, it's literally in Sanhedrin. If like people are going to be learning it and like.
So I don't know, maybe see it as a warning. Maybe it's like, you may think you have a lot of things to protect you, but in the end, it may not be enough.
If it's so hard and we need like the.
Maybe it's a warning of how to increase ourselves in order to prepare ourselves for that
But
time.
shouldn't there be like a little bit? Now you might think this is like a weird one. Shouldn't there be
Baruch
like a
atah
little
Adonai
bit of
Melech
like a
Haolam
motivation aspect? Like yeah.
You're kind of, he's kind of, it's like, seems like he's given up. He's like, well, we're all in big trouble. I don't want to be there.
Yeah, that's literally what it sounds like.
Yeah,
And
it does.
just in the like what we were learning before by the Mefta of Eliyahu saying that like you have that protection because you have like the inoculations.
And yet it wasn't enough for him. Maybe his point was the sinning. I don't know.
Like,
Then maybe come with Rav Yosef. Why is Rav Yosef so confident? Why is he so confident?
Because he has trust in Hashem.
or like he just believes in something.
And why is he, I always wonder about this. I don't know a commentary on this actually. I haven't seen one. Why does he give this thing, let me sit in the shadow of his donkey's saddle? What is that about? Why don't you just say, I'd rather be there? What does he mean with that? I always kind of understood that piece of Gemara to mean like, you know what? Just to even a glimpse from the worst place. Yeah, from the worst place.
Such a big person and he only wants to see the donkey saddle. Like what about
I would say that's a sign of, that's his opinion. That's a sign of his humility. No, though. I always understand.
humility, but there's
I understand his, one second. I'm saying, seems to be Rav Yosef is saying in that piece of Gemara that just to be present, even in the worst place, in the shadows, just to catch a glimpse, not even like to experience it like head on, just to be there. Maybe it's not a contradiction. Maybe Rav Yosef is saying that all the bad stuff that comes with it, it's still worth being at the actual revelation itself.
And you only get to be there if you're alive.
If you what?
Like if you died before.
Then you're not there.
Then you're not okay.
No, that's what he's saying. Not at all. Okay? Okay, there's more to understand on that, but we'll move on. A lot of questions. All right, page 74. Let's talk about the actual Messianic era itself. So now we got to the point where Mashiach has arrived. Good? Excited? So now we're going to see a very famous Rambam. And this Rambam is quoted a lot, but just so you know, the Rambam is not the only opinion when it comes to what the world is going to be like when Mashiach comes. We have the Rambam, his school of thought. We're going to see others as well, including the Ramban, who's going to disagree with the Rambam.
Always we follow the Rambam.
No?
Isn't he like the?
No, not at all. Not at all. People disagree with the Rambam, right? The Shulchan Aruch doesn't always go like the Rambam. The Yemenites do, but the rest of us don't.
Okay.
Not at all. He's greatly respected. We hear his opinion, try to figure out why he's saying what he's saying, but the halacha doesn't always go like him. Happens to be that he wrote a lot about Mashiach, so we really listen to what he has to say. Let's have a look. So he's going to say, what is the purpose of Mashiach's arrival? Why? This is his question. The Rambam is going to answer a question. Why do we need Mashiach anyway? What is the purpose of Mashiach? So he's going to give his answer. And he says, V'hato'elet hagadol, the great benefit, asher tiyeh ba'ot yamim, that's going to come in those days, who? Sherenuach mishubad malchiot, that we are no longer, the Jewish people are no longer, this is our benefit, there's a general world benefit, but the benefit for us that we should pray for Mashiach to come every single day, that we are no longer going to be subjugated, and that means negatively influenced and decreed against by the non-Jewish governments in the countries that we live in. So all the negative decrees that come from Iran, all the negative decrees that's coming out of Europe and Russia, and all the anti-Semitism that we're seeing, which in many cases is state-sanctioned or state-tolerated, that's gone. No more anti-Semitism. Shehu moneh otana misiyad mitzvat kulam, because that's really one of the main reasons that's holding us back from being who we can be, right? We're constantly being pushed around and shunted from country to country and from region to region. We're constantly being decreed against. It's been thousands of years of Holocausts and pogroms. And this has become a major, major problem. That's holding us back from being who we can be. He's like, that's the main difference in the pre-Messianic to the Messianic era. Mashiach is going to bring us absolute shalom, absolute peace. V'tar b'hachachma. And in addition, there's going to be a lot more wisdom in the world. Actually, maybe this is how the anti-Semitism is going to disappear. Ki, Kamoshin Emar, as it says in the book of Isaiah, chapter 11, verse 9, Ki mala aretz teya et Hashem kamayim liyam machasim. The world will be filled with knowledge, the entire world, of God as waters cover the seabed. Just like most of the world is covered in water, so too the knowledge of God is going to cover the entire earth. Every human is going to be at a higher level. And Isaiah the prophet is going to continue and say that there will be no more wars in the entire world. And people will not be spending their money on the military industrial complex that exists around the world. That's going to go. We are all going to be living in absolute peace and shalom. That, says the Rambam, is the main difference before and after Mashiach comes. That is not necessarily a miraculous statement. That just will come through an increase of knowledge and understanding and appreciation of people. That's going to be enough.
I wanted to ask, so when Mashiach comes, what is the goal of a non-Jew? It's not to be a Jew. So
Not at all.
So it's to act justly, but what does that mean?
Yeah, that means everyone is going to...
But say, okay, let's say you see Hashem literally in your face, you know Hashem is God, you know everything is all so clear. Why, I don't
You don't, even now, a non-Jew doesn't have to become Jewish now. They're perfect as they are. As long as they reject their avodah zarah, as long as they accept on themselves the Shem Spin Enoch, they can achieve olam haba and perfection and closeness to Hashem just by believing that and acting upon it with their mitzvot. They don't need to become Jewish. They will be able to enjoy olam haba. Unlike other religions where you have to accept Jesus as your Messiah or Muhammad as your prophet in order to get to olam haba, right, which is complete nonsense, right? It's drivel. For us, the Jewish people, the concept always was accepting God as your king, right, is enough.
So they're not going to pray, they're not going to do anything.
Oh, of course they're going to pray. They pray right now. Who says that?
They're following Jewish values, but they're not Jewish.
There's not Jewish values. Prayer is not a Jewish value. It's a universal value. God is not a Jewish value. It's a universal value. Why are you saying we don't have monopoly on God? We have monopoly on Torah and mitzvot. We don't have a monopoly on God.
So they're just going to act justly.
Yeah, absolutely. And stay as they are. And they can do that right now. And many are. Not enough, but many are. Yeah.
During the times of Mashiach, what's going to separate us from angels?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. In the days of Mashiach, what's going to separate us from angels? The main difference seems to be, well, not angels, we're going to remain humans with physical form, as Tchiat HaMetim, the resurrection of the dead, implies. However, the difference will be, says the Ramchal, is that we would have achieved greatness and they are made great. So we would have had the satisfaction and the knowledge that we had to go through a lot in order to reach that point. It's like, and maybe this is his metaphor, but it's definitely a metaphor that's used, two people on top of a mountain, both in the same place. One was dropped off by helicopter, so it's not the Ramchal's metaphor, and one climbed their way up. Both in the same place, but the person who climbed up obviously gets a lot more satisfaction for what they did.
Well, are more people going to be born during the time?
Yeah. Things are going to count. According to the Rambam, we're going to see in a moment, I'll show you the Rambam itself, so you don't have to quote me, you can quote the Rambam. The world is going to carry on as was and as is. The main difference, according to the Rambam, is going to be the lack of anti-Semitism and no more wars in the entire world.
So
That's the Rambam.
separate the people born during the Mashiach era from angels? Because they didn't have to fight or achieve anything or die to come back.
It means, well, neither did we. We could have been born and had, but we're going to assume that at that point, it's like world history would have led them to that point. We'd appreciate what got them to that point. Unlike an angel that is made perfect and purely spiritual. It's hard. We don't know. We're going to look at the Rambam. He's going to give a different opinion on this. It's difficult to understand because it's like I always say, it's like trying to think of a different color, a new color. It's almost difficult for us because we only know the world of struggle and challenge. We don't understand. We don't know the world of shibud. We don't know the world of kibbul schar. Yeah.
I feel like part of what gives people their purpose and like helps them find not meaning, but like what makes life is getting over challenges.
Once again, that's because you were stuck in Olam Hazeh, but that's not the perfect world. That only came around because of the sin of Adam and Chava.
What am I going to do when I wake up, God willing, one day when Mashiach's here?
Everything's going to be perfect, and you're going to connect. No more child. I know you're talking like a person, which we all do. You're stuck in jail and go, I don't get it. Here I am in this beautiful cell. I get my 3 meals a day. I'm protected from the elements. Why would I want to go out into the whole world? There's a whole world out there. Yeah, but I don't want that. I'm very comfortable in the cell. It's like a baby in the womb. I get fed. I get whatever I need. I'm warm. I'm protected. There's a little pipe that feeds me. Why would I want to go? Because that's not what you're made for. Ships are very safe in the harbor, but that's not what they're made for. We just don't even know what's out there.
Okay.
We just don't have full appreciation. Yeah.
Are there any sources that say when Malachim were created? Because we don't see them created.
Sure, we came before humans. Rashi mentions it.
I didn't know
They're
that.
created at Maaseh Bereshit, 100%. They were created before mankind. That's why Kadosh Baruch Hu consulted with the angels.
Like before Hashem created the earth.
No, that came
No,
first.
right?
No.
What day?
Came on what particular day? I should know that. I'm not sure.
Do you know what I mean? Because like light and darkness, like what that like.
We know. I don't know, but we know before mankind because Nase Adam, says Rashi, Hashem consulted with the angels whether they should create mankind, and he said, "Please help me make man. Let us make man." And Rashi says, "Who is the us? That's the Malachim." So these spiritual energies were created. At what exact point? That question is above my pay grade. Yeah.
This might be like a bit off topic, but about resurrection of the dead, I'm wondering like when all of our neshamas come back like at once when Mashiach comes,
Yeah.
how will that like fit into the like life cycle of like because you said the world will continue and like will carry on as we are, so like
We don't know. Okay, we're gonna. I want to bank that question because we're not at Tchiat HaMeitim yet. There's actually very little written on Tchiat HaMeitim. We'll have a look at a few sources. We'll see what Ezekiel says, but there's not much. Mashiach, we have tons, as you've seen. We've done about 5 or 6 classes already. When it comes to that era, we're not too sure. Different opinions when it's even going to happen. Some say early, some say late. We'll see. Let the Rambam finish his idea. So he says, the Messianic will be a time when kingships will return to the land of Israel. The Jews are going to return to Israel. The king will be very great. His palace is going to be in Zion, which you said is Yerushalayim. His name and fame will spread. He's going to be more famous than Shlomo HaMelech. All the nations of the world are going to make peace with him. All the countries are going to serve him on account of his great righteousness. So this is, Rambam's telling us, this is going to be an international phenomenon. Everyone's going to be involved. And anyone who does rise against him, which is going to most likely happen at the beginning of his revelation, of his revealing himself, I should say revelation, but his revealing himself, will be destroyed by God and given into Mashiach's hand. V'yimsor oto biyado. So there could be actual people who stand up, and most likely there will be against Mashiach, and he's going to vanquish them. And he's going to remove them. Good? Says the Rambam, and here's the famous piece. And we will look at the Ramban as well in a few classes. He says, Al yale alev, don't presume in your heart, I don't think. Shebiyamot Mashiach, then the days of Mashiach, that's once he arrives, Yevatel davar mimin hagosh el olam, that something about this world is going to change in any radical way. Or yesham chidush, or some newness b'maseh bereshit, in creation. Ella, and this is the statement you want to highlight, Ella olam kemin hago noheg. The world is going to continue according to its pre-existing pattern. Now that's the Rambam. That's the Rambam. The laws of nature, what he means is, the laws of nature don't necessarily have to be upturned when Mashiach comes. The world is going to carry on as is. There may be some miracles that occur, not necessarily, as we said, that's dependent upon us. But the world is going to carry on as is. There's not going to be any major change in the way Hashem runs the world. Let's finish. Oh, 1 minute, says the Rambam. Don't we have prophecies from Isaiah chapter 11, verse 6 and 11:7 that talks about a change in the nature of mankind? Says Isaiah chapter 11, verse 6. V'zeh shenemar b'Yoshia. V'gar ze'evim keves. We know the wolf is going to dwell with the lamb. The namar and the leopard im gedi, with the young goat. What about that? That sounds pretty miraculous to me. That sounds like a change from the way things have been. So the Rambam is going to say, not everyone agrees with the Rambam, that these words are mishalim. These are, as he says, a mashal v'chida, metaphors. These are not literal. When it says the lamb is going to lie down with the leopard is going to lie down with the goat, and the wolf is going to lie down with the lamb, these are metaphors. These aren't literal. It means that nations that are like a wolf are going to be at peace with nations that act like a lamb. A nation that is like a leopard is going to lie down and be at peace with a nation that's like a young goat. So that's his interpretation. Israel will dwell securely together with the wicked Gentiles who are likened to a wolf and leopard, those who want to hurt us. And as in the prophecy of Jeremiah, as Jeremiah, the prophet, chapter 5, verse 6, a wolf from the wilderness will spoil them, and the leopard will stalk their cities. Right? So we know that the nations can be referred to as dangerous animals that want to hurt us. They will all return to the truth faith and no longer steal or destroy. That's a reference to all the nations out there. Rather, they will eat permitted food at peace with Israel, as the lion will eat straw like an ox. These are metaphors. Similarly says, all these messianic prophecies of this nature are mishalim. They are metaphors. In the messianic era, everyone will realize which matters were implied by these metaphors, and we're going to understand why these actual metaphors were used, or we'll see the purpose and the effect of these metaphors when they actually come to the world. Yeah.
So nothing is going to change, like the nature of the world will still stay the same. And isn't the nature of the world right now that kind of what we just said, that like you have challenges and you overcome them?
That's gone. You've got to get ahead. It's going to change. No. No, change. He means change in the physical. No, human nature. Human nature is going to change. He said that. No longer war. No longer have to deal with the struggles of the Yetzer Hara. No, it's like the actual nature of the world itself. Right? The nature of the animals,
So
the king.
he's saying like it's still going to rain? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, that's what he's saying. Yeah. And the Jewish people will unite under Mashiach, as Ezekiel the prophet says, chapter 37:22. Vasitiotam l'goy echad. We're going to become one nation. Are we one nation right now?
Yeah.
Well, maybe not the way we should be. There's going to be absolute unity. Bayomahu, yeah, Adonai echad, u'shmo echad. In those days, God's name will be one, and we will be one. Right? That's what he says. Bahari Yisrael u'melech echad yeh lekolam. And we're going to agree that one king is king. Right now, there is no universal agreement. Even in Israel, right? They can't even elect one prime minister without, yeah.
So does that mean that there's not, because I know that like obviously every pasuk and like every thing in every sefer has its own like commentary and interpretation. So does that mean that there's going to be like one universal interpretation of everything?
Yes.
And like there's not going to be any sects of Judaism? It's
No more sects of Judaism. Gone.
No Ashkenazi
Gone.
party.
No. All gone. That's done.
We can all eat rice on Pesach.
Yes, you can all eat rice on Pesach.
One
Why don't
tikad.
we eat
If that's what you want, that's it. Why do you want Mashiach to come? I want to eat rice on Pesach.
But why don't I eat it?
It takes a Sanhedrin because there's no Sanhedrin to turn that around. Okay, and it's become accepted.
Mashiach will be Sephardi or Ashkenazi?
Good
What
question.
kind of question is that? Of course he's Sephardi. What kind of question is that? The answer is we don't care. Is
We
the
don't
answer.
actually care.
We don't care what kind of yarmulke he's got on. We don't care whether it's kippas truga, or it's a strimal, or it's a fez, whether it's a turban. We don't care. It makes no difference. Those are divisions which are holding us apart as people, which will remove themselves. Okay? So the peace and prosperity, says the Rambam, that is going to fill the world is going to allow us to be able to know goodness. Uvo azman, in those days, lo yesham lorav, there's going to be no more famine. No more famines. Velo milchama, and no more wars. Velo kina, and no more jealousy. Right? Velo tachrut, and no competition. Shatova, the good, tia mushpat harbe, will be bountiful. V'chol hamadanim, and every delicacy, mutzion ka'afar, will be available like dirt, readily available. V'lo ye'asa kol olam, and the task of the entire world, el ledat et Hashem bilvad, is going to be to know God. It's going to be your year in Israel. You go to seminary, your parents are paying for everything, everything's great, you just having a good time, eating, learning, growing. That is what you're going to do. Just like my daughter is doing right now for a second year in Israel, enjoying. Every time I see her, I go to another class. Here's a new Devat Torah, and I went out and used a credit card at the restaurant. All of this is going to be available for all of mankind. I am going to be able to go back to yeshiva and actually appreciate a lot more now that I'm married with kids, like I should appreciate it the first time round. V'lefikach, yu Yisrael chachamim gedolim, the Jewish people become great, wise individuals. V'yodim devarim hastumim, and they're going to know things that are hidden. The level of knowledge is going to increase. Kef kafai for the Jewish people. V'yasigu dat, and they're going to be able to attain knowledge, boram, of their creator, kefi koach adam, according to the abilities of man. And he quotes Isaiah, chapter 11, verse 9, Ki mala aretz deya et Hashem kamayim liyam machasim. Just as the earth is covered by the waters. So we are going to enjoy learning and growing and enjoying this world to a much higher degree. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. As Isaiah says at the end of days, Vayibachrati Yamim, Nachon Har Beit Hashem Barosh Harim, mountain of the temple of God is going to be established at the head of all mountains. V'nisa Migvod Narol of Kolakom, and all the other nations of the world are going to stream to Mashiach in Israel on Har Habayit, which will have the third and final temple on Temple Mount. And V'holchu Amim Rabim, many nations. That means people in the nations are going to say, Lochu v'naleh, let's go and go up, because we know Yerushalayim is high up in Israel. El Har Hashem, to the mountain of God, El Beit Elokei Yaakov, to the house of the God of Jacob. V'yareinu midrachav, and let's learn, v'nel chabarochatam, let's follow his ways. Ki mitzion, because from Zion, Yerushalayim, tzeitzei Torah. We're seeing this in our generation, right? Jerusalem, and the scholarship in Jerusalem is greater than anywhere else in the entire world. Torah, v'tzeitzei Torah devar Hashem Yerushalayim. And the word of God is going to go forth from Jerusalem. We're seeing that in our generation. Right? It wasn't that way for 2,000 years. Right? Most scholars were outside of Jerusalem, outside of Israel. That's going to change, and it is changing, Baruch Hashem. That Israel, Yerushalayim specifically is becoming the epicenter of Torah thought and Torah learning. Yeah.
So when you say that, like, I feel like there's two different aspects. Like, the one side is that, like, the Jewish people were going to, develop wisdom and we're going to understand the reason for our existence. Then the other side is, like, we're also going to be growing. But, like, what does that mean to grow if, like, Hashem has revealed himself? And
Just like they would have schools of prophecy that people can grow in intelligence and knowledge, that's growing and learning more and appreciating more. That's what it's referring to. It's not the challenge, the enjoyment that comes from it. The enjoyment that comes from it will grow as well. That's what he's saying. Actually, Rav Tzadok actually adds to it and says the knowledge of the oral law. He says the Bible stuff is one thing, but he actually says the main revelation of the oral law will come through Mashiach. Right? There's actually an expression you see in the Gemara a number of times called teku, when there is a discussion and an argument. Have you heard this idea before? Mm-hmm. And it's saying you don't know which way to go. It says teku, right? Which usually translates as we don't know. But it actually means tishbi, it's a reference to Elio, the Tishbite, right? Yitaretz Kusha Dubayot is going to answer all of our questions and challenges. So there's going to be a lot of, again, it's not just Torah concepts. Everything in history that was difficult for us to understand is going to be answered when Mashiach comes. Mashiach is going to be able to answer all of the challenges and difficulties that we have faced throughout history. One of the main reasons we want Mashiach to come is not just to answer all the different Talmudic debates and challenges that we had in understanding what the halacha is, some which is part of the galut, that we got stuck in this place in the first place, that we're not sure exactly what the halacha is and what the minhag is and what that's come through years of galut. He's going to answer all of that. But Mashiach is also going to answer every single challenge that every person has ever had, every difficulty. Why this war? Why that challenge? As a world, as societies, and as individuals. Your entire life and every challenge in your life is going to become extremely clear once Mashiach comes. We had to go through that challenge in high school. We had to go through that challenge at college. We had to go through that relationship problem, whatever it is. All of that is going to become extremely clear because that power of understanding comes through Torah. And Mashiach's job is going to give us the Torah ability to understand every challenge that has ever come to ourselves, our society, and the world. That's the lashon of Teiku, Tishbi. Eliyahu Navi is going to bring Mashiach to give us that understanding. So whether it's the big stuff, like the Crusades, right, or the exiles, or the Holocaust, all of that is going to be answered and put into a frame of understanding, which we don't have now when Mashiach comes. Only Mashiach can give us that overall understanding of everything bad that's happened to us as a people, as a nation, as the world, as individuals, to answer and clear up all those questions. With that comes absolute satisfaction and understanding. Yeah?
Yes.
I want to leave the next piece to next class because we're going to look at the Ramban and his understanding, which is going to be different to the Rambam.
So who are we meant to follow? How do I do, like, what am I supposed to do, Rabbi?
Got to figure it out.